Hey everyone, hope you're doing good and staying safe. So, in this portion of the webinar, I'll be covering how we at Stax approach data analytics. We like to think of it as a philosophy of data analytics. Often in conversations about data, and Randika mentioned this as well, the discussion is it's derailed towards tools, technologies, programming languages, algorithms, and whatnot. And because this tends to be the glamorous side of data analytics, to be able to say I'm using a cutting edge algorithm or machine learning or artificial intelligence. But see, technology plays a supporting role. It should serve a much bigger purpose. The worst investments are those that are made purely for bragging rights, just to be able to say at my company we use state of the art technology. And what's that state of the art technology doing? Nothing but taking up server space most of the time. So, what we propose doing is focusing on the business problems to be solved, especially at the early stages when you're thinking about how you or your company can become more data driven. Everything else is secondary to intimately understanding those business problems. So, let's simplify running a business for a second here. The purpose of every business is to create value and obviously profit from that value. And there are only two ways that you can do that. You can maximize your revenue or you can minimize your costs. And theoretically, it's that simple. Everything that you do in your organization, sales and marketing, financial planning, recruitment and training, adopting a new technology, all of this is done in pursuit of either one or both primary objectives, maximizing revenue and minimizing costs. So then, what's data driven value creation? Very simply, it's using data to drive and guide these actions. It's making sure that you consider the patterns, the stories, and the insights in your data before you make a decision. And this doesn't come easy, especially to organizations that aren't data driven. Often people don't realize that there are four pillars or four necessities for creating value using data. The first and the most important thing is having a data mindset. Do you understand? Do you understand your problem well enough? Do you understand what data can help you resolve this problem? Do you know what hypotheses need to be tested? And once you've run your analyses and performed your experiments, do you know how to turn those insights into recommendations and plans of action that will resolve the problem you were first thinking of? So, linking everything to a business problem is a key characteristic of a data driven organization. The second most important thing, and perhaps the most obvious thing, is the data itself. Do you have data that's relevant to the problem that you want to solve? Is that data comprehensive? Is that data clean and complete? Are there any gaps that need to be filled in with external data sets? You could have the greatest analysts on your payroll, but the quality of your data will define their success. The third pillar is an analytical skill set. What do you want to get out of your data? Do you want it to tell you why something happened? Do you want it to tell you what you need to do? Do you want it to tell you what could happen if you did something? This needs to be very, very closely linked, once again, to the problem that you're trying to solve. And finally, and to some of you, this may be the juicy part, it's the efficient tool set. And the keyword here for all of us is efficient. So, not using technologies for the sake of using technologies, but using the tool or the algorithm or the machine learning model or the dashboard that solves the problem at hand. And all these pillars are equally important, but we call them pillars for a reason because they need to support value creation. Now, I've been talking so much about the characteristics data driven organizations must possess. So, I also want to cover how you could go about doing that with relation to everything that I've said about mindset, about data set, skill set, and tool set. The first step is reflection. Where do you and where does your company currently stand in its journey to become more data driven? In every aspect of this journey, how mature is your organization? How mature is your organization in understanding its most pressing needs? How mature is data as an asset within your organization? How mature is your organization's capabilities to make sense of this data? And finally, how mature is your organization's and especially your leadership's ability to make decisions informed by these insights? And once you know where you stand at the moment, how mature you are in each of these four domains, you can then begin figuring out where to go. You just need to know where you stand at the moment. So let's start with the maturity of needs. At the moment, there is an infinite number of things you could do right now to create greater value, each with varying degrees of success. But you don't have infinite time, and neither do you have an infinite budget. And if you do have an infinite budget, please reach out to Stax. So in that case, what do you do when you don't have an infinite amount of time and an infinite budget? And this is a really, really tough question to answer because there's just so much to consider. There's the customer facing side of your business, the market expansion side of your business, the operational side of your business. And then to make it even more complex, you have sub areas within each of these areas to consider. And for a recent project that we ran, we had this exact same problem. We spoke to more than 50 directors, managers, vice presidents, and leaders across a large manufacturing organization in the US to find out what kinds of insights they needed to perform better in their roles. And as we had more of these conversations, we started seeing patterns in their needs. And eventually, of the 50 requirements that had been communicated to us, a small subset accounted for the greatest potential immediate impact across the organization. And that was our eureka moment. Those were the pressing business needs that would have an outsized impact on the organization. And so we rolled out our value creation framework. We rolled out our value creation framework, pulling out our playbook and picking and choosing the right analyses to address these business needs. Supported, of course, by our Analytics Edge platform, which is our repository of proprietary, purpose-built tools and knowledge of popular technologies. So the key takeaway here is identify your most pressing business needs, and then let that define the analyses that you need to run, the work that you need to do. Start with the end in mind. A lot of companies are currently sitting on a wealth of data. It's really everywhere. It's on your website, it's on your social media, it's within all of the systems that you use, it's spread across your computers in Excel files and in Word documents. And there's probably some of it in your cupboards as well. And that's just internal data. And there's also a wealth of information available online, often freely accessible, that can be easily extracted and analyzed. But with that being said, right now, the data is disparate. It's there, but it's all over the place. It's got holes and accuracy issues. It's in formats that you can't easily analyze, like an unstructured document. And if you were to run an analysis on these bits and pieces of data that you have, that would result in a garbage in is garbage out kind of situation. So how do you prevent that? You prevent it by enriching your data. And there are various ways that you can do that. The first thing is integrating your data. And integration really is a fancy word for putting everything together, right? It's a simple concept, but there's complication in the nuances. If you have data that has historically existed in separate systems and has historically been analyzed separately, then stitching them together can be quite time consuming. They might not be really made to fit, but the investment would be worth the trouble because it would unlock a comprehensive view of your organization that you probably don't have right now. You don't have a holistic view, right? Because you probably only have a departmental view or a functional view because each of these departments or functions have their own systems. And it's so difficult to have one single kind of 360 view of the organization using data from a central place. The second is layering in your external data with your internal data. A lot of people are sleeping on the value of external data sets. These may be market size or market growth percentages that you can use to compare against the growth of your categories or your product lines. These may also be what your customers are saying about each of your products or your outlets or your branches online. And then you can compare that to what they're saying about your competitors. And finally, you could uncover the reasons behind why you've been seeing increasing customer churn. And all of this is possible with data that exists online, the chatter about your business and the chatter about your products. The third enrichment method is structuring. There's only value in data if, sorry about that, there's only value in data if it can be analyzed. And with modern technology, you can turn a lot of things into analyzable data sets. Once again, if I was to use the customer reviews example, these are unstructured free-form statements. But a tool that we have called Social Sense can classify them into themes. So you can cut through the clutter and you can focus on the most important topics. Similarly, you could use robotics process automation, which has become another buzzword in the data space. You can use RPA to extract specific data from scanned documents and store them in an Excel file or a database, so it becomes far more analyzable. The fourth enrichment method is something that's often overlooked. It's transforming your data in various ways. It's cleaning things to make sure that things are standardized. It's filtering out irrelevant data points, perhaps things that are irrelevant to the problem that you want to solve. It's filling in gaps by pulling in stakeholders that may know the answers and turning it into the right structure or the right format so that it can be easily plugged into a dashboard or a machine learning model. And then in the end, after all of these enrichment mechanisms or enrichment processes, what you have is an enriched data set, a very holistic fact base that contains a comprehensive internal view of your organization, an outside in view or an external view of your organization, and it's all ready to be plugged into a model, it's all ready to be visualized, and it's all ready to be analyzed. So you're no stranger to this framework by now. My colleague Randika was just speaking about the analytical journey. But the types of questions that you currently regularly ask from your data is a good indicator of your organization's insight maturity. This is the foundational question. What happened, right? How much business did my sales team bring in last year? How much did they farm out of existing accounts? How many customers did we win and how many customers did we lose? And then we move on to an investigative question. Why did anything happen? Why did all these things happen? What explained the drop in our sales performance? Did we focus too much on smaller clients than larger contracts? Are there a lot of things currently in our pipeline that haven't been converted? Did we lose a key member of the sales team who took many large accounts with them? And so far with these two, we've covered the exploratory questions. And now we're going to move on to the harder questions because they're more targeted and they generally involve a lot more variables, right? The first type of advanced question is predictive. So once again, as Randika mentioned, what's going to happen? Based on how we've been performing, to continue with the same example, based on how we've been performing up until this point and based on our data of seasonal demand, what are next quarter's sales figures going to be like? What would happen if we did something a bit different? If we focused on these XYZ product lines than these ABC product lines? How would that change our predicted performance? What would happen if we prioritized, certain markets or customer segments over others? We're using our data with these questions to play out scenarios in the future so we can decide which scenario is optimal to pursue. The second and perhaps most advanced question is, what should we do? Given that we've fed very rich data on our organizational sales activities into a model, let's have it connect the dots and look for hidden patterns and make recommendations to us on exactly what we should do to hit our revenue targets, right? And perhaps it's which sales and marketing activities we should pursue. Or an example that's very close to a lot of our hearts is recommendation engines. If you've spent any time on Amazon, you'd know that based on both your transactional and your browsing behavior, Amazon recommends products to you. And that's their analytical engine working in the background, making decisions on what you might be interested in so that Amazon can score another sale. And if you think this isn't effective, you are underestimating its impact. It's publicly and commonly known that 35% of Amazon's revenue is attributable to its recommendation engine. It's attributable to an advanced prescriptive analysis. And the primary thing that you'll observe as you move up your analytical journey is that your questions also go from being very reactive to a lot more proactive. So addressing potential problems instead of only existing problems. You need to obviously address your existing problems, but you also need to keep potential problems in mind so that they don't become existing problems in the future. And this mind shift, or rather this mindset shift, is a characteristic of data-driven organizations. So in my opinion, there are two technologies that have revolutionized the way that we do business. The first is email, and the second is Excel, and by extension, PowerPoint. When I joined Stax, I was blown away by the fact that the companies that invest in other companies developing cutting edge solutions still make many of those investment decisions using PowerPoint and Excel. But the problem is this revolution happened ages ago. And there's been so much advancement since then, but we still seem to be stuck in a very static form of thinking. Excels are point in time views of a particular situation. We now have real-time dashboards directly connected to our data sources so we can monitor performance in real time. We have business intelligence systems. So on top of monitoring performance, we can also run simulations and see what would happen if we change something. And then we have decision automation. And the simplest use case for this is a decision taken routinely and set on a few established rules. So for example, if this happens, then we need to do this. If that happens, or if someone's saying this, then we need to do that. The thing here is, why do you, if the rules are so clear cut, why do you need to make that decision? Or why do you need to wrap that decision up in an email and send it out? A computer can very, very easily lift this burden off you so that you can focus on the more interesting things that require collaboration and require creativity, something that computers are still somewhat struggling to do. Advances in AI are amazing, but computers are thankfully still struggling to collaborate and be as creative as humans are. And with AI and machine learning, you can take decision automation several steps further. So even if you think there's no clear pattern in your decisions, it may just find one for you and be able to make it faster than you. But this isn't to say that you should replace yourself with a machine. This is to say that your time is far more valuable than what the routine and what the mundane demand. And you should have the time to do what executives do best. In fact, I would go beyond that. I would say you should have the time to do what humans do best: collaborate, problem solve, and be creative. And that's the characteristics of executives in a data-driven organization.